Hi, my name is Tasha Medford, and this is my older adult video presentation. For this presentation, I interviewed an 82-year-old African-American female. She is good friends with my Nana, and I've known her for several years, and I knew that she would love this opportunity to be interviewed. During the interview process, she told me that she was one of 5 children. She was the middle child, had 2 older brothers and then 2 sisters. She was born and raised in Ambler, PA, which is not really far from where she currently lives. In Ambler, she lived in a small 2-bedroom home. She said the room that she stayed in was about a 10 by 10 room, which she shared with her 5 siblings, so they were packed in there. Later in life, she was married twice. Both times her husbands passed away, and she had a total of 3 children. In her professional role, she worked as a household manager. She was responsible for managing the household's finances and managing the other employees in the household. She also helped with any type of nannying jobs, cooking, cleaning, you named it, she did it. So for this interview, I focused on Erikson's theory of development stage 4, which was industry versus inferiority. And this stage occurs during ages 6 through 12. This is the stage where children play and they learn. Now, when they're able to succeed, they learn to be very industrious. However, if they experience repeated failures, they develop feelings of inferiority, which then start to hamper their chances of success in the future. So the reason why I focused on this stage is because since my subject was 82 years old, she grew up during a time when success was very limited and there were more failures that she did experience. So for this stage, I really focus on the fact that she grew up during World War II and during the Great Depression. When she started telling me her childhood stories, she started off with very pleasant stories about how, she had a big family, they had fun. And then when we started to get into the depth of her story, she did explain to me that one of the toughest memories of her childhood was overall safety. And I immediately thought, okay, physical safety, since she grew up during the war. And she was saying that some of it was physical safety because she did experience bomb raids, and they were always worried that the war would then come over here. And she was a child, so she didn't really know much about the war. She just knew that people were fighting each other and that people were dying. But she also shared that the safety of not knowing where her next meal would come was also one of the biggest challenges she faced at a young age. Like I said, she did have a larger family size. There were 5 kids in the household with 2 parents. And she said a lot of times they didn't get to eat every day. Unfortunately, if there was a limited amount of food, the girls would actually eat last and the men would eat, so her dad and her 2 brothers would eat. So she grew up when basic necessities like food and water were scarce. There wasn't really any type of medical treatment, so her early experiences were very challenging. And then on top of that, the fact that she was an African-American female, she also grew up in a time when oppression, racism, and segregation were very common. So that also put some limitations on her development. So those are kind of the experiences that we really focused on during the narrative, because I wanted to see how those factors would have impacted this specific developmental stage. When looking at this developmental stage, we talked about several different challenges. She shared with me that her father died early on, so when she was about 7 or 8 years old. She doesn't exactly remember. Her father went off to work and then never came back. To this day, she says she does not know if he died at work during a work accident or he later died in the hospital. She just recalls him leaving to work and never coming back. So that put a lot of strain on the family. Again, she grew up during World War II and the Great Depression, so there was a lot of poverty going on, very limited resources, concerns to her overall safety. And since there was a lot of limited resources, there was also limited access to necessary services, including medical or even mental health treatment. Those services just weren't around in her neighborhood, and especially weren't easily accessed by African American families. During the developmental stage, though, she did have one big accomplishment, which was being able to go to school. She did share that she went to a small community school with the other neighborhood kids, which she enjoyed. It was something that was seen as a privilege for her because not every child got to go to school. Unfortunately, parents would take their kids out of school regularly, or the kids just didn't have the things they needed to go to school, so they just didn't go. But she was able to go. For the psychosocial crisis that I decided to focus on was a couple different ones. The first one was the relationship with her parents. The relationship with her mother was very strained due to the fact that her mother focused really on keeping them safe. She doesn't really remember her mother ever hugging her or ever motivating her or, pushing her, congratulating her on successes. She just really remembers her mom being focused on putting food on the table, and that was it. The death of her father really put a strain on the family. They went from having 2 people to bring home money to just them, the mother. So then that tied into a lot of the other failures because there were just things that they now was even harder to access. They might have been making it or holding on, making it, and then when the father passed away, that was one less income in the house, so then there was less food on the table. Again, the limited resources due to the overall poor economy, then on top of the father passing and the mother being the only breadwinner for the house. Another one of the things that led to some failures that she experienced was a history of sexual abuse. She was molested by someone that was very well respected in the community and that was really trusted by her family. And when this happened, she did share with her mother, and her mother did not believe her. So at this time, she stopped going to church because that's where the man was. She stopped going to school for a little bit, which was one of her biggest accomplishments and one of her ways towards success. So that abuse really put a damper on her development and led to problems later in life. For the biopsychosocial factors, I broke them down by the biological, psychological, and social factors. For the biological piece, I really focused on medical health treatment. It's common nowadays for people to go to the doctors whenever they were sick. Unfortunately, that just was not an option. The family didn't have enough money for her to seek medical treatment, and the fact that she was black, you weren't able to go to just any old doctor. You had to go to a black doctor, which she said in her area there weren't many. So she did not seek medical treatment. I do know she has a scar on her finger, and I've always noticed the scar, but I never wanted to ask. And during her narrative, she shared that this was a simple cut that she got playing around. Unfortunately, she said her mother just wrapped it up with some tissue and left it alone. It later turned into a bad infection, and actually a piece of her finger had to be removed. So that just is an example of how poor her medical health treatment was and how that also interfered with her overall development. When she got the infection, she got very sick and she had to leave school for a period of time until she got better. So which put her behind in school, and also was just one of the other challenges that she had to face at a very young age. Looking at the psychological factors, I looked at her emotional development. And the reason I focused on that was not only because of the sexual abuse that she endured, was also because of the relationship with her mother. When talking about her mother, she would describe her as being almost cold and heartless. And looking back on it, she's now able to see that maybe her mother was that way because she was in survival mode. It was all about putting food on the table. But at that age, she said she almost disliked her mother because she never saw her mother as someone loving her or encouraging her or pushing her. So for that, and then also on top of the fact that when she told her mother she was abused, her mother didn't believe her. So she grew up, and she would say that she grew up in a time when emotions weren't important. Crying was seen as a weakness and unnecessary. If you were upset, you just didn't talk about it. So that's why I focused on her emotional development for that piece. And then for the social factors, I really focused on the fact that she did come from a lower socioeconomic status. She did have a fairly large family, and with the passing of her father, they had very, very limited financial resources. The relationship with her family was strained due to the fact that the father died. Mom was always working. She even said the relationship between her siblings was somewhat of a competition because they were a lot of times competing over who would get the last piece of bread or who would get food. And the last piece is she mentioned that she had a few friendships in her community, but a lot of those friendships ended abruptly, and a lot of that was due to the fact that she had a lot of friends pass away at their young age, either due to the fact they weren't able to access mental health treatment or the fact that they weren't able to get enough food, so unfortunately they passed away. Another one of the biggest factors I focused on was the fact that my subject was an African American female growing up during the time when oppression, racism, and segregation were the norm. Going back to what I previously said about accessing medical treatment or even school, because she was Black, certain privileges just were not given to her. Adequate schooling, adequate medical treatment, that wasn't an option for her. And that led to a lot of failures. The fact that she missed school for weeks due to a minor infection nowadays would be unheard of, but back then she didn't have the opportunity to go to a qualified doctor that someone would treat her just because she was ill. Unfortunately, she had to go to someone that would treat her and take into account the fact that she was Black. So the oppression that she faced at such an early age, and the fact that she grew up in a time where that's all she knew of, really, really put a damper on her road to success. When looking at the multi-system lens, I focused on family, community, and outside institutions, and then overall social policies. Within the dynamics of her family, her father died, she was in a single-parent household, and she had a large number of siblings. So within the family, there were some challenges with just that. When I looked at the community and outside institutions, the religious institution that she had put a lot of trust in and was once very involved in completely destroyed her trust when she was molested. That led to a lot of different behavioral factors. She, for a time, dropped out of school, and that just kind of snowballed future failures and then really dampened her self-esteem. She had commented that after that happened, she just didn't care anymore. And then the overall social policies when she was growing up really limited her, not even because she was a female, but because she was a Black female. She grew up during the time of racial segregation, so there were not resources specifically for her and her family due to the fact that they were Black. So when you look at the overall lenses, they kind of trickle down. The policies that were put into place limited her access to resources. The community that she grew up in didn't save her or safeguard her. It was actually one of the things that caused her more failure. And then within her family, the death of her father, the limited resources, the fact that her mother was raising 5 kids on her own, all that kind of spiraled out of control, and the subject really didn't have any really support. So all those factors really pushed her more to the inferiority side of the Erikson's development stage than the industrious side. The other theory I looked at was the ecological theory. I chose this theory because I really wanted to focus on how the subject's development was influenced by multiple different factors. In Erikson's theory, he really just focuses on the age group, but there are a lot of different things, especially in her life, through her narrative, that I realized that there were factors all over the place that led to her course of development. So when breaking down her story, I broke it down into the micro, the meso, the exo, and the macro systems. From the smallest scale, I looked at the relationship that she had with her family and with school, since those were her 2 biggest outside resources. Her family she had daily interaction with, and she describes her relationship with her mother as very poor. but she describes her relationship with school as something that she loved and endured.